quite honestly, you're kind of going back to what we used to do. I started with the Detroit Police Department back in the 60s, and I was there through the mid-80s, and that really was what we tried to do. I mean, was to have different picnics and different things, and really there was a sort of somewhat of a unity between the community and the police department, and that's what I've tried to do over my 40-plus years in law enforcement, even when I was in Farmington Hills, and it really pays dividends. I mean, you have to, you have to treat people like you want to be treated. That's always been my philosophy. So, that training and communicating, with the citizens is so important. And again, if we talk violent crime as far as the youth, how are we dealing with the youth in Detroit? I know the mayor, I know the chief, I know the prosecutor. Everybody's very concerned about what are we going to do about the youth in Detroit.
Yeah, it's a big issue. In fact, our office has been interacting with the mayor's office to talk about coming up with a comprehensive strategy for dealing with youth violence and providing alternatives to youth violence. The best fix would be jobs. I think if you could give teens jobs for the summer, that'd be the best fix, but we don't all have the money to do that. One of the things we're doing is the Department of Justice is sending in a team next week for a 2-day listening tour to meet with the mayor, the chief of police, and all the stakeholders in our community to help develop a strategy, not only here but around the country, for dealing with teen violence in urban areas. But specifically, we are doing a few things. Within our office, we are going out to schools and talking with kids about the consequences of guns and violence and drugs. We have a summer camp for at-risk youth where kids can get a chance to see some positive experiences and get some positive mentoring and role modeling. And we're also doing some anti-gang work in some of our communities in Southwest Detroit to try to intervene with kids who are at risk of becoming involved in gang activity. And so we're trying to do some positive things, but we can certainly do a whole lot more.
Do you see in the past, 4 or 5 years, an increase in gang activity in Detroit, or is it about status quo? I mean, it's always been a problem for 20 years.
It is, and what's interesting about Detroit is it doesn't seem that we have the huge national gangs that you hear about, the Crips and the Bloods. We have a little bit of that with some of the gangs, the Latin Counts and the Serranos, but more of what we have are some kind of neighborhood street gangs. And but these neighborhood street gangs are responsible for some violence, and so I think it is worthy of our attention to try to dismantle some of these neighborhood street gangs. Some of it can be done with intervention and prevention, when it's younger kids, but when it amounts to committing violent crimes, assaults, carjackings, armed robberies, that's when it's time to get in and enforce and prosecute.
Exactly. Getting back to getting summer jobs for these kids, I mean, that's so important. And, the way the economy is in Michigan and throughout this country is very difficult, but I would hope that some way that could be a priority to get funding to get these kids jobs. I mean, and it's all about jobs in Michigan right now. That's the #1 priority, not necessarily with the youth alone, but across the board. But I don't know if there's been any discussion as far as how you can, have maybe some nonprofit organizations, provide funding for some jobs, maybe like the Carmanis Institute. I mean, maybe he could do something. Some of the big, I guess, what would you call them? The people in Detroit that really care about Detroit, like Carmanis and others.
Yeah, in fact, that's a topic that came up the other night at the forum, at the NAACP forum. Carol Goss from the Skillman Foundation was there, and actually talked about they already are investing in prevention of youth violence, but we talked about how we can do more, and Reverend Anthony talked about a program within his church, and he challenged other churches to do the same, which is if you can raise $1,200, you can give a student a job for the summer, and he challenged every church to do that. But Skillman Foundation expressed interest, and the foundation community has expressed interest in raising some funds, because I agree with you, the best way to keep kids off the street, busy, earning some money and learning some skills is to give them a job for the summer.
Very good. Barbara, we're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to Police Journal. Barbara, maybe you could bring us up to speed the best you can, and I know that it's ongoing and has been ongoing, and that's a number of the corruption cases that you're dealing with in eastern Michigan. I guess basically the majority of them being in Detroit itself. And I know there's been a number of indictments And I know that you've been working on these cases for probably at least a couple, 3 years.
Yeah, well, we've had some recent movement. We've had a couple of guilty pleas in recent weeks with Sam Riddle and Mary Waters. And it's not just Detroit. That was in Southfield,
Right, right.
some of that activity as well. But I can't comment too much on it because some of the investigation continues. We've had some good convictions, but public corruption is a very important area. We rely on our public officials to make decisions for us on the most important things that our tax dollars pay for. And the idea that people, instead of giving the honest services they were elected to perform, are acting in their own self-interest, to me is deeply offensive, and especially in these times when our budgets are so lean, to be spending public money in ways that is not in the public interest is really deeply offensive. So I have a very strong desire to hold those people accountable. Now, with respect to what's going on in our city investigation, I can't talk about timing of things, but one frustration that has been frequently expressed that I share is, why does it take so long to bring these cases? And the answer is because we want to be extremely thorough. We want to be accurate with our information. We want to give ourselves a very strong likelihood of winning. But at some point, you have to say, we have enough evidence and we're ready to proceed, because I think on the other side of that coin is the desire of the community to have closure and move on and not be under a cloud of suspicion. And even for the targets of investigation, whose names get reported in the newspaper from time to time, they have, I think, a right to have some closure, not be under a cloud of suspicion forever. So along those lines, the one thing we can do is, we always want to be thorough and careful, but we have added resources to our public corruption team. We have taken cases away from them that were not focused on this area, and we have added attorneys and support staff, and the FBI has added agency resources so that we can move through this as quickly as possible. And so I think we're on target, and we're hopeful for some closure soon.
Good. I've had the special agent in charge of the FBI on the show too, Andy Arena, and I know that he's been very aggressive, and he really pointed out, as you pointed out, that it takes time to develop these cases. I mean, the public. They're wondering why, and you pretty well explained that. You want to do it right. You don't want someone to be indicted that perhaps because of a flaw in the case, something happens, and their character, their reputation could be ruined.
Yeah, absolutely. And guilt beyond a reasonable doubt is a very, very high standard, and it should be. To take away someone's liberty, you'd want to make sure that a jury is convinced of guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. But to make sure it's never going to be foolproof. And I have told our people we don't want to be afraid to take on the hard case, because we need to take hard cases, and we need to even accept the risk that we may lose one from time to time. But we want to position ourselves as best we can to win those cases, because when you bring a case like that, you want to have a strong possibility of success at trial.
Now, this may be a question that you cannot answer, but I have received calls, and a number of other people in law enforcement, and that's the Monica Conyers case. I mean, I get calls, probably once a week on why is she still free on bond, and then she's asking for an extension now. I mean, that's not your responsibility or your decision. It's the judge, correct?
It is the judge's decision. I mean, we have some input in that decision. We did not oppose her request for time. She had expressed, I think, what has been shared publicly is a desire to be with a family member for a medical procedure. So we did not oppose that. But why is she still free?
I mean, that question's asked quite often.
Yeah, and I think it is not unusual that a person is sentenced, and then there is a period of time that goes by while the Bureau of Prisons studies where is the best place to put a prisoner. They need to know about their history. They need to know about any treatment needs. They need to know about any particular security precautions that need to be taken. With someone who's been a public figure, there are probably things to protect her in prison that would need to be accounted for. So that is a normal process that there's a several-month period of gap. And why is she free? To get a detention during this period would require a showing that the person is either dangerous to the community, might hurt somebody, or is a risk of flight. That is, they might leave the community. And neither of those factors is present here. So it's really normal that the case is really proceeding in a very normal way. She's not being treated any differently than anyone else would be treated. No special treatment, but no worse treatment either.
Sure.